Welcome you to this conversation with Christina Miller. I'm Andrea Hill, and we're broadcasting live from the MJSA Expo in New York. I'm here with Christina Miller. She's the founder of Christina T. Miller Sustainable Jewelry Consulting. She's also one of the original founders of Ethical Metalsmiths and a pioneering voice in responsible jewelry practices. Welcome. Thanks for joining me this morning.
Thanks for having me.
So, there's so much going on right now. We're getting so many questions. Where do you want to start? You want to start diamonds? You want to start gold? Like, what should we talk about first?
Gold lands more squarely in my wheelhouse, but there's so much to say about diamonds. So we've been working together on gold. Do you want to start there?
Yeah, let's start with gold.
Yeah.
We've been working on gold really hard for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Almost breathlessly.
It's
So
true.
Christina said something. We were in a meeting at the Amazon Aid Foundation for the Clear Gold Network, which Christina heads up. And Christina said, it was like 2 days after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and Christina says, are we worried about the gold that's in Russia's stockpiles? And at the moment, I glossed over it. Everyone glossed over it. We just were kind of like, let's focus on other things right now. And then it must have been a day later, 2 days later, I woke up in a cold sweat at about 3 o'clock in the morning thinking,
So sorry.
oh, I know, it's Christina's fault. Oh my God, what about all the gold in Russia's reserves? Because they're sitting on, 2,300 metric tons of gold in the reserves. So this is already gold that's out of the ground in their central bank, ready to be used.
Right.
About 142 billion when we looked at the numbers last week. It could be different by this week.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And so very quickly we came to realize again how little transparency there is in the way that gold flows. And it's among all other things, it is another call to the industry that we really have to get this under control, and we need to be pushing every relationship we have in gold supply chains and diamond supply chains to be more diligent about where materials come from. And it's not unless we have a lot of people talking about this that we're going to see any kind of shift in the way that we can deliver on traceability and transparency, because right now it's just so stubbornly opaque.
It's so difficult. So what we did that day, I sent an email, and Christina immediately reached out and pulled in her network. We got Susan Wheeler involved. She pulled in her network from the Chicago Responsible Jewelry Conference. Amazon Aid team jumped in. We had representatives and people weighing in from State Department, Treasury, JVC, the Jewelers Vigilance Committee. Sarah and Tiffany joined us. OECD.
Right, a criminal analyst.
Criminal analysts. I mean, we pulled in this team from around the world to say, okay, is it likely that Russia's going to try and get these reserves into jewelry supply chains? And if they do, what can we do about it? And everybody agreed it was likely. But what can we do about it? That's the tough part. There are some things we can do. I don't want to start this whole conversation on a downer. So we came out with a letter to the industry. Maybe you want to elaborate on what we're asking the industry to do as our starting point.
Yeah. So some of the key things that we're asking in the letter is especially to be vigilant of your own supply chains. And that's a big ask because it's actually really hard to do that. So depending on where you fall in the supply chain, you have a monumental task ahead of you. And it's frankly, for a lot of independent jewelers, it's not fair. I mean, come on, it is not fair.
For a small business to try to have to figure out how to trace its supply chain back through one of the most Byzantine supply chains that are out there.
Yeah. So what we tried to do was, raise awareness that we don't have the kind of transparency that we would like to see broadly, and then in Russia in particular. And then we identified some of the potential risks. Like, what are some of the places where the material could be flowing into our supply chains, into our jewelry in particular? And, we know that there's a lot of jewelry manufacturing going on in India, so there is material flowing through there, and they took a very
They're not participating.
They're not
in sanctions.
There you go. Thank
So
you.
it's going to be very easy for gold to be flowing from Russia to India, where so much of our jewelry is made.
Right.
Same thing with China. I mean, those two countries together make up the bulk of jewelry manufacturing that we consume in the United States and around the world.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, what we saw then, in this call, it allowed us to kind of look at what some of the industry actors are doing immediately. And so we were pleased to see that the LBMA, for instance, suspended good delivery status for all of its Russian refineries, which is one of the choke points where material could be coming through.
What about RMI? I don't remember what RMI did at that point. They did too, right?
I did. I just recently looked at their statement, and they concurred that they would recognize LBMA's action. And I can't say that I've cross-checked to see if they had any that weren't cross-listed that should have been of concern.
Okay.
Something we should look at again.
Yeah. In our spare time. So that was one thing, is figuring out, gold makes it to the jewelry industry from, through the refinery process and the gold and the metal fabrication process where the sheet and wire and, all of the baseline metal goods are made. And then it makes it to jewelry manufacturers who may or may not do their own fabrication and refining.
Yep.
And then it makes it to the industry where we distribute it out to a variety of retail points.
Yeah. I think, too, something that folks might not realize, why is an organization like Amazon Aid involved in this and the Cleaner Gold Network? And one of the reasons is because Amazon Aid is monitoring gold flows where gold is coming from the Amazon rainforest. And a lot of the gold coming from the Amazon rainforest is illegal, or even more extreme, it's illicit. So it's funding illegal activities. And one of the main channels that it makes its way to market through is through the country of Venezuela. And one of the primary purchasers of Venezuelan gold happens to be the country of Russia. So the Russian gold stocks, even before the war on Ukraine began, we were already aware of the fact that they were building up their central bank's stocks in part with gold from the Amazon.
Well, and I was fascinated to find out when I started working with Amazon Aid that when Amazon Aid wanted to so the goal there is, stop the destruction of the rainforest. And gold is very destructive when it's illicitly mined or illegally mined, because they're not following the conventions that should be followed to protect, the environment. So when Amazon Aid wanted to figure out how to reduce that kind of illegal mining, there were no resources to show them how gold flowed around the world. So they had to go figure out who's taking this gold out of the ground and where does it go after that to make it to market. And weren't a lot of the resources you had to rely on investigative journalism?
Yes. Yeah, and isn't that, I think that's a really interesting thing when it comes to, we're at an industry trade show, and it's compared to other industries who are really doing important work right now on traceability and transparency, like fashion, for example. There are a lot of companies that are super actively engaged. And we need to see more of that within the jewelry industry, because right now it's a little bit of a shame that it's the investigative journalists that are bringing the information about our supply chains to us. With materials like gold, it kind of makes sense, in a way. It is a material that people can turn into money.
Exactly.
And so it's going to be mined in moments of need, in moments of illicit activity. We know that there are always kind of these underground uses, networks and potential for it. But it's still, I would much prefer if, as an industry, we were stronger players in the solutions. So this news wasn't coming to us through surprise exposés in the news.
Exactly. Well, and I think that's a big part of our letter to the industry is we have got to step up as an industry. We need to step up because it's the right thing. But we also need to step up because if consumers are exposed to exposés and the jewelry industry has not been doing the good work of keeping in this particular moment Russian gold from coming to our market and funding their aggression against the Ukraine. But in any other moment, destroying the Amazon or poisoning water in Africa, or the many things that gold can cause. If we are not being proactive as an industry to stop those activities, then we're going to be seen as complicit, and that's also bad for business.
Yeah.
So there's
And
a lot of risk.
and then on the other side, it's a little confusing sometimes to people that supporting artisanal and small scale gold mining, for example, is a solution.
And
to
it is.
environmental pollution. It's an antidote to deforestation, etc. And this is because artisanal and small scale gold miners have a ton of support in these efforts. It's been recognized as an important component of international development. And so there is support there, and it's been recognized that with that support, there are programs to reduce mercury. Like here at the expo, we have Toby Pomeroy and the Mercury Free Mining Initiative. When it comes to deforestation, there are programs called forest smart mining. Where there's also one of the key things there is like having the support a geologist, for example, an expert geologist coming to the site to help miners identify where the actual gold is, so that they're not blasting more than they need to.
Yep.
That improves their yields, and then that also helps to limit the overall impact. So. And the other cool thing is when you're supporting those artisanal and small scale mines, you have a much better sense of where
your gold is coming from. And I think that's so it's tempting to think, well, if we can't trace gold flows, which we should be able to do a better job of, we can't yet, but we should. But if you can't trace your gold flows easily, then people tend to throw up their hands and say, then what can I do? I can't do anything. But Christina's point is there are lots of artisanal and small scale mining projects producing gold right now that you can buy gold from, and exactly the source. So in this moment, it's not funding Russian war aggression, and in all other moments, it's doing a lot of great things.
Yeah.
So what are some of those programs?
One of the most well-known is Fair Mind. So Fair Mind is an assurance label. So Fair Mind isn't an organization.
Not a particular mine.
No, it is a mining standard that artisanal and small-scale miners apply to. And if they get certified, then they are labeled a Fair mine. And if you are purchasing gold through that system, you can also then stamp your jewelry as being fair mined. So we mentioned Toby Pomeroy earlier. He's on the board of the Alliance for Responsible Mining. That's the organization that governs the Fair Mine project. And then we also have there's a manufacturer here, Riva Precision Manufacturing. You can purchase gold chain that is made with Fair Mine gold through Riva, and then they have a new program supporting jewelers who want to do manufacturing of custom lines
in Fair Mine, and they're looking at findings. So because Fair Mine findings are
really
a gap, they're really difficult to find. Yep.
Yeah, and then with Amazon Aid and the Cleaner Gold Network, that's a place where we're bringing people from all over and working to develop a database of artisanal gold supplies and opportunities where you can purchase that material. A project that I'm working on is called Zahabu Safi. There is never going to be a Zahabu Safi gold. Instead, Zahabu Safi is this bigger project, and within it, it is encouraging, through funding from USAID, it's encouraging multiple supply chains being developed of gold from the Democratic Republic of Congo. Which is a really complex territory to work in. So it needs quite a bit of international support. And all of this is in the spirit of democracy, responsible business practices, and a moving away from corruption into legitimate supply chains that can be monitored and therefore help to support the miners and their communities, and in fact the country's tax base.
Right. Yeah, when we support artisanal mining, we're actually supporting families, feeding families. A lot, when we walk away from mining entirely, tens of millions of people around the world would not be able to feed their families. So there's there's a beneficial aspect to mining when it is done right, like projects like these. Now, is this say it again?
Zahabu Safi.
Zahabu
stands for
Safi.
clean gold in Swahili. It means clean.
So is the Sahabu? Why
Zahabu
can't I do it? Sahabu
Safi.
Safi, Safi. Got it. Okay, so is that project going to be a craft code project?
The sites, it's funny, I was just on a call about this morning. The sites are aiming to meet the craft code expectations. So right now, there are two sort of baseline, entry kind of level programs that organizations supporting artisanal and small scale gold miners seek to achieve. So one that you'll hear about is OECD, and the OECD has guidance in terms of or in your supply chain. How do you know that you're purchasing material from a good, reputable company? How should the people be treated that you're doing business with, et cetera, et cetera? And so what that means is that the mine site itself has to meet certain expectations and has to be able to report to the purchasers what those things are. So the Zahabu Safi program is helping to establish a mechanism so that that information from the mine sites can be flowing on a regular basis to the purchasers. So by purchasers, I mean like significant refineries,
Right.
Globally. Another one that they work toward is craft code. And so craft code is also, the expectations aren't as extreme as fair mined. And so it is in a way a standard, but it's a set of expectations that the miners meet in order to, it's good for them, but it's also, in many ways, it gives the buyer the confidence that they're not supporting, for instance, really egregious forms of child labor, that they're supporting initiatives where the business practices of the mining organization, often this is in the form of a co-op, are getting the support that they need and are able to function as a legitimate business. Do they have all the paperwork in place? In other words, are they legal with the government? DRC, for example, folks have been letting us know that the mining laws supporting artisanal miners are actually quite good in the Democratic Republic of Congo. This is because of all the investment and effort that's been put in post the horrors endured.
Yep. Well, and what you're describing speaks to the thing you always say to audiences when I hear you speak, which is start where you are.
Yeah.
Craft Code allows these mines to start where they are and get on the road to improvement, which they can only do if they are actually starting to have some economic benefit so they can continue to invest in the improvement.
Exactly. For them, it's the evidence is, am I making more money than I was before? Am I able to take care of my family better than I was before? Am I able to, have access to medical care? Am I able to have access to electricity? And it's also, the thing is, we also tend to have a little bit of a misaligned vision of what those mine sites look like.
Mm-hmm.
They've actually been well organized for a long, long time. People know what their role is there. People know who is allowed to negotiate the business deals, who's going to be actually, breaking the rock open, who's going to be doing the processing of that material. So they're already well organized and functioning. They don't need the NGOs coming in to help them do that. What they need is the assistance, making sure that they can bring the material along clean routes and clean supply chains that are accepted, according to Western business practices.
Yep. Yeah, get their gold legitimately to market.
We could switch to diamonds.
We could. I want to finish on gold. Just a couple of other thoughts on gold.
Okay.
Because for those of you in our audience that are buying gold, from finished gold, not, maybe you're not buying grain for casting or metals for fabrication of your own custom goods, or maybe you're doing your own fabrication, but you're also buying some finished products. And I think a lot of people are asking, well, what can we do to make sure that the finished jewelry we're buying isn't of Russian origin? And one of the things we're discovering is it's hard right now. You can't get any real guarantees that we've been able to uncover. But what you can do is use this moment to help push us forward. we've been talking about needing cleaner jewelry supply chains for years now. This isn't a new conversation, but every once in a while something happens that is such a flashpoint for society. Russia's attack on Ukraine is a flashpoint. It's so universally unacceptable what's happening there. And we can use this moment, this coming together, this rallying, and say, we can't have another moment like this ever occur when we don't know what the pathways are of our gold to market. And we can use this moment to push back on suppliers and say, I need more than just verbal assurances from you. You need to be able to tell me where your gold is coming from, which it should create sort of a domino effect in the industry of everybody pushing back.
Yeah. It would, it does really help when there's a collective voice asking for that, which that's one of the goals with our letter. And so we had just shy of 200 people have signed on.
I think we're over that now.
Yeah.
You can sign the letter.
Yeah.
You can go to globalgoldtransparency.com, and the letter's right there on the homepage. Read the letter. At the bottom of the letter, you'll see the industry partners that all came together, industry and civil society, and it wasn't just industry, but the group that came together to form the letter and sign the letter. And then beneath that, you can sign the letter yourself, and your signature will show up right away. And we want your participation. We want all your voices.
And at some point we'll be reaching out, with further engagement. But so that one of the first things is just signaling that there is a desire for this. I'm frankly tired of the excuse that consumers aren't asking. And I bet right now, given the circumstances in Russia, that we are going to have more consumers asking about whether or not Russian goods are in jewelry. It alerts us to other conflicts around the world. I would be remiss not mentioning how many global conflicts are funded by gold and other metals
and gemstones. And we heard some of that. There was some criticism. Why Russia when you didn't speak out on things that are happening in Ethiopia? It's like there are so many conflicts around the world that are funded by materials that the jewelry industry uses. And my response to that was, it's not that we're not talking about these other conflicts. It's that people aren't necessarily listening. And so everybody's talking about the Russian aggression right now. So we're being a bit opportunistic and saying, now can we talk about this?
Yeah.
So that was really the thought process there.
Yeah, there was plenty of outrage in our community for every, in my adulthood, everything that I could have been commenting on and taking a position on, I was, And so the why now, it's like, it's the same. It's like this, if somebody's going to hear us, maybe this is the moment.
Yeah. If you're interested in participating beyond signing the letter, which we really hope you'll go sign the letter, sign up for the next Cleaner Gold Network event and come participate in that. Become part of the network, because it's not just a passive thing; it's an active thing. We'll be sending out a letter. There is in the United States. There's an effort to create. It's an act that was announced by senators, or it's being co-sponsored by Senators Hassan, King. I'm going to blank on the two. I'm going to blank on the other two right now. It'll come back to me. Haggerty and one other. They are trying to muster Senate support right now and community support for something called the Stop Russian Gold Act. And that would impose secondary sanctions on companies and individuals that are known to be transacting in Russian gold. On the globalgoldtransparency.com website, we will be putting a letter out that you can sign and push to your congressional representative so that you can voice your support for that too. That's another thing you can do. Anything else you want to say they can do?
Yeah, other than seeking out some of those sources, sources coming from artisanal and small-scale gold mines. I mean, there are some refiners that have achieved recycled certification, verifying that the gold that they have in their supply chain is coming from recycled sources. But you have to, on every certification that you find out there, you really have to look at You have to look at the certification itself, because there are a few where literally a bar of gold could have been mined, turned into a bar of gold, moved into a bank, sit there a day or two, then moved to a refinery and be considered recycled. So you really have to look careful at the definitions for the recycled certification to know that, is it in fact coming from manufacturing scrap? Is it legitimately post-consumer jewelry, meaning I don't want this anymore and I'm going to send it into the refiner for melting down? You really have to look carefully. But that is an avenue that you can take. It doesn't have as much impact on the 42 million artisanal miners. That's not just for gold, that's for jewelry, gem, diamonds, gold, diamonds, gemstones. But think about the people that you could positively have an impact on if you continue to explore really closely how your purchasing can have a positive impact on the ground with fair prices, transparency. We're in a moment where the world cares more about quality of life than getting something cheap.
Yep, we are. And you can play on that and buy and sell your values. And that's something to feel good about in business.
Yep.
So, okay, diamonds.
Yeah.
So similar problem. Russia has been the largest producer of diamonds for quite a few years now. The Alrosa Diamond Company is the largest producer. They are 33% owned by the Russian Federation. And we have some sticky points with diamonds in our industry. For instance, one of our responsible standards bodies is the RJC, and Alrosa sat at the executive committee level at RJC. They resigned and are temporarily suspended from the board. From the board? And there were originally sanctions against the chairman of Alrosa and against Alrosa, but the original sanctions didn't stop Alrosa from trading diamonds. It really stopped them from the financial transactions behind it. They could still move diamonds. Then secondary sanctions were introduced saying, okay, now we can't buy the diamonds, but it only affects the rough. So if the rough goes to India and is substantially transformed, and where does most of our diamond cutting happen? India. Once it's cut, the secondary sanctions no longer apply.
Correct.
So we are still very much at risk. I think a lot of people think, oh good, there's sanctions on Russian diamonds, therefore we don't need to worry. No, you need to be vigilant. This is an issue.
No, and it's been frankly a bit offensive to hear from within the industry explorations or looking for opportunities to exploit the loopholes so that Russian diamonds can continue to flow through the system. That's unconscionable at this time. And
it is. We're not supposed to be looking for a way around this. We're supposed to be looking for a way to support the responsible thing to do. We need to support Ukraine. We need to support good ethics. We need to be making choices not to find an easy way to get Russian diamonds to market without breaking the law, but rather to find a way to work with our consumers and give them what they want while being totally transparent about why something might be getting more expensive or why something's less available for now.
And it's kind of a known thing that diamonds get all mixed up together very quickly. A parcel will come in, it will get mixed up with others to facilitate the quick cutting process. Polishing, it gets mixed up even more. And the assurances that are currently available don't meet the expectations of proof that really concerned jewelers have as well as customers have. So it's not right how difficult it is to prove where a particular diamond comes from. It's also frustrating the way our own system works. So country of origin applies to where the material was most altered.
Correct.
In other words, if the diamond is cut and polished in India, it comes in as an Indian diamond. Or likewise a Chinese diamond, and then the mine origin, is lost, and even the original ownership of that stone is lost.
Yep.
So that's our own custom system.
That's our custom system. So is it legal to say to your customer, well, this is an Indian diamond? Yes, it's legal. That's not our question right now. Our question is it right? In fact, yesterday in one of our education sessions, I'm pointing this way, over on the stage on the MGSA floor, Don Palmieri stood up and posed a question to one of our speakers saying, yes, but do you think American consumers would willingly want to buy a diamond of Russian origin right now? Pointing to the fact that American consumers don't want to be duped. So we need to do the work of making clear to our suppliers, once again, I don't want a diamond that came from Russian origin. Not now.
Not now. And you can't deny that 33% ownership of the Russian Federation. We're all really sensitive to not wanting to adversely impact the lives of everyday Russians. That's not
our goal.
Point. But when jewelry industry materials are being used to fund a war, being used to fund aggression, being used in human rights violations.
That's right.
I don't know that we have time to open that can of worms today.
Though I think most of us can't even stand to wake up and read the news these days. So it's all, it's out there. We know what's happening.
Yeah. We made some progress on diamonds with the Kimberley process, but Russia sits as a member, of the KP. So, and there are many challenges. The Kimberley Process Civil Society Organization, who holds an observer role to the Kimberley process, meaning they don't have decision-making power. They can just speak what they're seeing. And from their point of view, the role of the Russian government in Angola, the role of Russian paramilitary folks across the continent is of grave concern to communities that are impacted by diamonds. And this is for the entire diamond industry
supply chain
to be concerned about.
And it predates the invasion of Ukraine. So, there's some really good articles recently in The Economist, if you haven't seen them, looking at how do we move forward in the world balancing free trade and this conflict between open and not open societies. And it's a conversation we're all going to need to engage in and get informed about. And you may not think you're part of it, but when you're buying materials that can be easily converted into cash to buy machine guns and tanks, to fund aggression, then you actually are part of that conversation. And it's time to speak up.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes people say, well, how big is this problem really? Like, what's the likelihood of, my thing? And it's a fair question to ask, to know how big your impact is. Part of the reason why we're sounding the alarm is because it's hard to know.
It's hard. The opacity itself is such a problem.
Yeah. And so you have to sort of go in with the assumption that any purchase you make is a risk, is potential, has the potential to be involved. And so you have to do your due diligence, which means ask as many questions as you possibly can. Again, returning to it's not quite fair. We can, in my work as a consultant in this space, I help companies develop questions to ask to try to get to the bottom of where their materials are coming from and what the business practices are like of their partners and so on. But we're limited.
We are. And yet, when individual voices come together, and this is why we have these opportunities like Cleaner Gold Network, like the Chicago Responsible Jewelry Conference, like Ethical Metalsmiths who can join, when we come together, then we can become stronger voices, and there's power in that. So It isn't fair. And we really want to call out our industry to do a better job at the corporate level on this. We're also calling on all of the makers, all the designers, all the small businesses that make up our jewelry industry, and say we can become a much larger voice when we work together.
Yeah, and let's do it because it's what's really interesting about an advantage that independent small companies have is that you can shift your purchasing decisions on a dime, literally from one day to the next. And there are alternatives that are available to you that aren't as accessible to larger brands, harkening back to purchasing from artisanal and small scale miners because of the way that material flows and because of the additional cost, because it's not easy. It's not easy developing these programs. It's not easy getting the gold out of the country in a transparent way. It's just not easy. And so it does cost a little bit more. But then you have the confidence that you're supporting something. You have an incredible story that you can tell about your jewelry. And, you can be a more active participant just in the whole picture. And the folks I work with, they garner a lot of positive feelings around not only participating in it, but getting a much deeper understanding of how the whole thing works.
How it works. Yeah, this is our work.
They're finding joy in that, and then they love telling their customers about it.
Well, and the talking to your customers thing, I know for a long time people would say, yeah, customers say they want responsible goods, but they're not willing to pay for it. And there was some truth to that. There has been truth to that. That's not true for all consumers. There's always been a niche of consumers that are willing to pay more, but there have been some recent studies done over the last, I'd say 18 months that have indicated, and big studies, McKinsey level studies, that are showing that 50 to 70% of consumers are reporting that not only are they interested in more responsible goods, but they're demonstrating that they're paying more for them. So they are putting their money where their values are. There's just no good reason not to do this right now.
Yeah, and in luxury, gosh,
we're not talking milk and bread, guys, okay?
Right. This is already a really important purchase for people, and this isn't your T-shirt. This is something of real significance, and you're already in for a penny. You might as well be in for a pound.
For a pound. When you said that, it reminds me. Susan Crowe always likes to say, if you see a T-shirt for $5, somebody suffered to make it.
Yes.
It's like, and there are people that are thinking that hard about their T-shirts, so certainly they can be thinking that hard about their gold and diamonds. Now, I don't think we can end this without calling out RJC. RJC is one of our standards organizations. Voluntary standards are good and important. They don't have to be perfect to be valuable. Can we embrace standards like RJC and then get better from there? I'm a firm believer in that we can get better over time. But right now, RJC is being too quiet on the topic of diamonds and the influence of El Rosso in their organization. And we want RJC to take a stronger, have some guts, take a stronger stand.
Yeah, the Responsible Jewelry Council in name, right, when we say out the whole name, by adding those credentials to the name alone, it creates a certain association with trust, with every company that has become a member. And now it's over 1,500 members. So increasingly, the responsibility to not only bring people into it, but also then create really good ways for calling out when someone in a particular business in the system is not upholding the expectations of the organization is really important. And I don't know, a lot of people might not be aware that there is a grievance mechanism that anyone can fill out on the RJC website. You can explain why you're filing the grievance. You can give tremendous detail about that. What's tricky with Alrosa, for example, is while they stepped down from being a board member, Alrosa is still a certified company within the Responsible Jewelry Council. And at this moment, I don't know all the ins and outs of the legal expectations that are in place, the relationship between the company and the certifier, or the standard holder, which is RJC. Regardless of that, it sets a bad tone for everyone that is a legitimate member of the RJC to be currently having such blatant use of diamonds funding a war.
And we're making progress, and we don't want to lose any ground from this. So look, I consult the jewelry industry. I consult the corporations in the jewelry industry. It's not comfortable to get up and say things people don't want to hear.
No, it's not.
We'll lose some money for it. Those of us who live in this industry space and have to make money in it, yeah, there's risk involved. That's what you do, and that's what we want the RJC to do. I mean, we could talk all day, but did we cover the big points?
I think we covered the big points.
All right.
Yeah, I think we did.
Well, thank you. I got Christina to do this at the last minute. Talked her into coming to New York City, and then got her to stay a little longer.
It's fun to be here.
I so appreciate you doing this.
It's fun to be here. Thanks so much, Andrea.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this morning. We really appreciate you tuning in, and we look forward to your help and your suggestions. There's a way to communicate with us on the globalgoldtransparency.com website too. Please do communicate with us, and we're looking for ways to involve the community even more in this effort.
Yeah, I mean, maybe one of the last notes to say is some folks have identified, well, you're like a small group, even though there are a lot of these additional signatories, but you're kind of a small group. And so there's a standing invitation that as the need arises, we will have sub-conversations as it applies to retail, as it applies to international relations, as it applies to diplomacy, etc. We'll have breakout conversations. So if you're interested in kind of a mini think tank on a particular topic, we're ready to facilitate that.
Absolutely. All right, cool. Thanks, everybody.